Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Saturday morning PI Guy live stream. Thank you so much for joining me. I will be answering your PI industry related questions. So if you have any questions, hop down into the chat right there and you can put your question. I'm going to try to get to as many as I possibly can. And if you're watching this after the live stream, well, you can go into any of the comments of my videos and you can leave a question and I will try to get those into a future Saturday morning live stream. Let's hop over right away into our questions. Our first question is from Raymond Bellick. Raymond is a subscriber to the channel. Thank you so much, Raymond, for your support. He says, nice camera, John. He was talking about the body-worn camera, this one right here, my CamPro camera. And if you want more information on that, you can go over to the official PI Guy webpage. That's freeprivateinvestigatortraining.com. Just go up here under PI gear and it has all the gear that I use and recommend. You can go here under PI surveillance and let's find it in here. It's right here, the CamPro HD body cam, the high definition body cam, heavy duty and high definition. It is very heavy duty, to be sure. It is a great camera. It comes with 128 gigabytes of built-in memory. It is absolutely a wonderful camera. I love it. And what Raymond is asking about is time stamping an option with this camera, or do I use the same software as I do with my Panasonic HCV 180 camera? And if you want information on that camera too, that's my go-to surveillance camera, you can get that as well on my webpage, freeprivateinvestigatortraining.com. On this camera, you can set the date and time on it, which is really good because that means the video that comes out will have the date and time stamp right there in the metadata. So then you can use software like IVE Investigative Video Editor that I use, and it will put the date time stamp in it, or you can make it display the date and time stamp. And I have all of these turned off with the date time stamp, whether it's that one or my regular handheld spy cam or my HCV 180 or any of my cameras. I usually have the date time stamp turned off. So it's in the metadata, but it doesn't put it in the video itself. And that way, when I use Investigative Video Editor, IVE is what I call it, it will pull that metadata and put it into my video, and then it looks the same. It's uniform across all of my devices. So I hope that helps out, Raymond. Going on to our next question. I see a lot of people hopping in. If you have questions, PI related questions, hop down in the chat and let me know. I will get to them as soon as possible. Also, you can go into any of my videos and you can put anything in the comments and put questions in there, and I will try to get to those. Our next question is from Eddie Freeman. John, do you think a blue vehicle would be okay for surveillance? Absolutely. Now, it's going to depend on how bright a blue and, different things like that. If it has a lot of things that stand out, then, you might have to mitigate things, do some things to make it look less like it doesn't stand out as much. But I think a blue vehicle would be absolutely fine, especially if it's a darker blue vehicle. And it's going to depend on where you're at, too, of course. I'll tell you a little story. One of my favorite surveillance vehicles was an old Pontiac minivan, and I absolutely love that thing because it had no console, so it was real easy for me to hop into the back and I could sit back there. And the back seats, they weren't bench seats, they were all individual seats. There were 5 seats and they're all individual seats. So I took out the one directly behind the driver's seat. I took out the 3 in the way back, and then that left that one middle one right behind, and I could fold it down and I could literally sit on top of that, and I had a 360-degree view all around me. Absolutely loved it. The problem with that van was it was bright red, and that made me really stand out. So I had to do a lot of things like sit back farther away from my subject's residence. I had to be careful when I was following so I wasn't weaving in and out too much because people are going to notice a red vehicle. I did get burned more often in that vehicle. I didn't have it for a long time. I think I ran that for about a year and a half, and then I ended up changing it up. I loved it because I was able to stay so covert inside of it, but exterior color didn't allow me to always stay hidden in, when I was out there in that bright red vehicle. I think a blue vehicle would be fine. My first vehicle was a black Pontiac Grand Prix. I had a red pickup that I did some surveillance in. I had a van. I mostly have had neutral colors. I try to stick to neutral grays, browns, things like that. But I think it's probably fine. If you think you're standing out a lot, then you probably need to do some things that help you stay covert. Our next question, see a lot of people hopping in here. Go ahead if you have any PI industry related questions, hop into the chat and let me know. I will try to get to those as soon as possible. Our next question is from Yogab. I'm not even going to try this. We're just going to call you Yoga. He says, what if you get a W-2 from a PI firm? And what Yoga is talking about, he was watching a video where I was talking about tax deductions for private investigators. And if you're getting a W-2, if you're a W-2 employee, well, first I'm going to preface this. I am not a tax expert. I am not a CPA. I am not an accountant. I'm not giving legal or financial advice. But if you are a W-2 employee, I believe there is probably some things, depending on the situation, where you may be able to deduct some things as an employee, but you need to talk with a tax expert. You need to talk with a CPA or a tax expert about that. If they are requiring you to purchase certain equipment, I believe those may be tax deductible somehow. If you have to use your vehicle for surveillance, things like that, there may be some deductions in there as well. But you need to talk with a tax expert about that to make sure that you've got your 6 covered there. Our next question is from Bob Frank. He says, how do you detect bugs that are entirely inactive until a scheduled time and that do not burst data? Also wondering if the Orion would detect bugs that are shielded in some manner. Thank you so much for the question, Bob. And if any of you have questions that are hopping on here, go ahead and put them in the chat down below. What Bob is talking about with a burst device, it's a device that might be recording video or audio right now, but it's not transmitting any data. It may transmit on a schedule once an hour, when it's scheduled, 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever, something like that. So it's kind of a drop device, but it bursts stuff out. What he is talking about, though, is if it's a drop device that doesn't burst out, but it's got a schedule. So from 2 to 4 p.m., it starts recording, something like that, but it never transmits anything out. And we would use, if we were suspecting something like this, the Orion from REI is a device that we have that would be able to detect something like this. The Orion is very time consuming and difficult to use, but it would be able to potentially detect a device like this. Other than that, the way we usually find these, and most of the threats, I'll be completely honest, most of the threats that we find when we go out on bug sweeps, we don't find them because of the tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment that we have. We need to have all of that equipment because we have to make sure that we're clearing a property properly. But most of the time, we're finding those with eyes, hands, and inspection cameras as we're looking in every nook and cranny for any kind of a device, for anything that doesn't belong there. So that's how we're usually going to find that. We do not take the Orion out on every case that we go out on. It is so time consuming to use it. To do the average house with 2 investigators, if we were going to scan every inch of it, because it has a small circular area that you scan and you have to go slow on everything, it would take a week for 2 technicians to go out and do an entire regular house, to scan every wall, the ceilings, every piece of furniture, the floor, everything like that. So the best thing on something like that is going to be eyes, hands, and inspection cameras. And I see a question, or I see a comment there from Leah, the JDPI. I became a PI in 12/22 and I am self-employed. What jobs can I do from home? I don't want to do surveillance. Thank you so much. I don't want to do surveillance either, but sometimes I have to. But I understand a lot of people don't want to do surveillance. I work with a lot of investigators, and some of them just aren't cut out for surveillance. I mean, it is a lot of art and science that's involved there. What can you do from home? You can do background checks. You can do open source intelligence. You can do a lot of different stuff like that. I would say take an OSINT course, open source intelligence, and learn kind of how to do that. And then you can start offering those services, doing background checks, doing locates. You can do locates, skip traces. Process serving is another one. You can't do that from home, but you can run the business from home. But you have to go out. You still have to knock on doors and interface with people and stuff like that. And process serving, again, depends on the individual, whether you're good at it or bad at it or enjoy it or don't enjoy it. I enjoy it to a point, but I'm getting to the age where I probably am a little too old to be getting chased off of porches at 9 o'clock at night all the time, so I generally subcontract that out. Another thing that I do, I subcontract out a lot of my work. I do some of my own surveillance, but I subcontract that out. So you can advertise a lot of that work. You can do infidelity cases. You can do insurance surveillance cases, things like that. But then you hire a subcontractor. Get with your state PI association, get hooked up there, and you can start to meet people. And you'd probably have a listserv where you'd be able to put out jobs when you have a job, and you hire somebody else to go out and do that. There's a lot of surveillance investigators that do not want to chase the work. And that's why most of my work I actually sub out, because there's a lot of them, they just want to go out and they want to do the surveillance, they want to get the video, they want to write the report, they want to get the check. They don't want to deal with selling to a client, writing the contract, writing up the final report, sending it to the customer, dealing with all the questions. So that's some ideas there for you. So going on to our next question, if anybody else has a question, hop down in the chat and pop it in there. Let me know, and I will try to get to it as quickly as possible. Our next question is from Randomly Poster 1975. Random says, that's cool and all, but this is my thing. Where do I go to fill out an application to do this? Randomly was watching a video on how to become a private investigator. I'm going to kind of jump on the back end there of Leah's question. Get with your state PI association. That's where you're going to find larger firms and people like that you would be able to either become a W-2 employee or a subcontractor with. They will also be able to help guide you in understanding what your state PI licensing requirements are. That's very complicated. Almost every state has PI licensing, and you may have to have your own license. You may have to work under somebody else's license. You may have to have your own license and work under somebody else's license, or you may not have to have a license at all. But there's no one place that you go. You're not going to probably go on like monster.com or something like that and just fill out an application and get jobs as a private investigator. I don't know. You could check that out and you could try it, but I doubt that they have a lot of stuff like that. The big thing is going to be finding those PI firms that are hiring people, and that would be the best way to do that. Cindy Ruiz says, how did you come up with your business name? That's a really good question. EVCO LLC, I have a lot of different businesses. So I'm going to talk with primarily EVCO LLC, EVCO Investigations, and Greeley Process Server. Those are the ones most related to the private investigations business. My first gig was working as a surveillance investigator for a larger firm out of Denver, and they required me to have a business, just like I require subcontractors to have a business, because then I'm subcontracted with a business. It keeps me a little more at an arm's length away. It defines them definitely as a subcontractor, my business hiring their business, things like that. But I had my final interview with them on a Friday. They were sending me work on that following Monday. I had to come up with a name. And I knew that I wanted a name for my primary business, EVCO LLC, that could live beyond just private investigations. So I didn't want to be like John and Associates or anything like that. I lived in a little town called Evans, Colorado. and that's the EV and the CO, because I went home and I said, I have to do this. I got on the Secretary of State's website, cost me $50 to start my LLC. I had to have a name, and that's what I went with. Then it's DBA EVCO Investigations. You always want investigations in your investigative business name, especially for SEO. So then when you buy a website domain, it has that word investigations or private investigator or something like that in there. And we got a lot more comments coming up here. Black Widow, hey, hi, how you doing? Leah says, I really appreciate the wonderful advice. Thank you so much, Leah. Victor, I've been binging on your vids for a couple of weeks. It's commendable how many videos you've made. Thank you so much for your support, Victor. I really do appreciate it. I am putting out a lot of videos, about 4 a week right now. 5, well, maybe it's 5 a week. There's my Monday and Friday regular videos. That's what I call my regular videos. My Wednesday, these live streams go up Wednesday as a regular video, and then I've got shorts that go up Tuesday and Thursday, and sometimes I just pop other stuff up there. Generally, it's usually a couple of them a week, Monday and Friday at least, but I try to do as many as I can to keep everybody informed. Let's hop back over to the mailbag here, and let's get back to Vado Loco here. How do you find out if someone is deceased? And this is a great question. For myself, I'm a private investigator. If I'm doing a locate on somebody, and this comes up a lot, especially if we're looking for a homeless individual or someone that just hasn't been seen in years. Sometimes we have family come to us and they're trying to find somebody. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my PI databases, my paid subscription databases, and I'm going to punch in their information. If I have their first name, last name, date of birth, or other things, Social Security, last known address, phone numbers, that's going to pull them up. Usually if they're deceased, that's going to tell me if they're deceased and give me some information. Now, if the decedent recently passed away in the last day or two, week or two, even month or two, it may not be in that database yet. Certain things have to hit certain things for that to all get in there. If it doesn't, I'm still going to look for that, whether that says it or not. Just because those databases do not tell me that my subject is deceased, I don't go with that and say, well, they're not deceased. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to look at local newspapers. That's usually the best place to look for obituaries. If I know where they're living, I can go to that local newspaper, and usually online now, most of them, you can search there and you can search somebody's name. You can go to obituaries. There's certain things that they leave free for people to be able to see without having a paid subscription. So I do that. Beyond that, you also want to do a lot of OSINT, open source intelligence investigations on it. You can search for the person. I'm going to go through this really quick. This is a simple way to do it, but it's definitely not all-inclusive. But you put the person's name in quotes and then the word obituary after. So if it's Bob Smith, you put in quotes Bob Smith and then obituary after that. It's better if you know the middle name. If it's Bob James Smith, you put that in quotes. You put Bob J. Smith, Bob J. period Smith, Robert J. period Smith, Robert J. Smith, Robert James Smith, Robert Smith, things like that. You need to come up with all of those and you start searching. Now, if it's a common name, I can guarantee you, if you go out and you search for Bob Smith in quotes and obituary, you're going to come up with a lot. You're going to scroll through all of those searches and you see, well, this person passed away in 1859. It's probably not your 30-year-old subject that you're looking for right now. So you have to kind of use some of that information and you can go to it. Genealogy pages are very good to go to. I have a subscription to some of those, mostly, so I can go in and I can look for people. I can also find people, find their relatives and things like that. So I hope that that helps out right there. Cindy says, thank you so much. And Black Widow says, so happy to catch you live. And I'm glad that you're online. Thanks, everybody. If you have any questions, PI industry related, hop down into the chat and let me know. Or you can go into any of my videos in the comments and you can pop a question and I'll try to get them into a later stream. David is the next question here. He says, why do insurance companies hire PIs while they have their own investigators, adjusters? What makes the difference? Great question, David. The big difference is one, a private investigator is an arm's length away from the original transaction. We're a third party, if you will. So we're not employed by the insurance company. We are only finders of the fact and we're going out there. That's the biggest reason. But also, insurance company investigators, whether it's an adjuster or an investigator, somebody in the SIU, Special Investigations Unit, whatever, they are generally internal. Now, an adjuster may be out looking at roofs or looking at damage and things like that. They are out in the field, but they're not trained professionals to do surveillance. And I don't even know if they have adjusters on cases like for workers' comp, slip and fall, injury, things like that. And they have case managers and things like that, but they're internal, and they're not investigating the same way we're investigating. They're going through making sure that all the forms have been filled out, that all the I's have been dotted, all the T's have been crossed, and everything seems to make sense. And they're looking for those red flags. And when those red flags come up, then it may shift over to SIU, the Special Investigations Unit, and they may take a look at it, and they may decide if it's going to go out to a PI. And sometimes adjusters are the ones that send it out to a PI. But then we are the ones that are going to go out and do the surveillance because we're trained in that. I don't do a lot of that SIU work. I do surveillance. I do neighborhood canvases. I do scene investigations, taking photographs, different things like that. But I don't do all of that internal stuff. So that's the big difference right there. Leah asks another question. I was looking into buying errors and omissions insurance coverage. What type of insurance, if any, do you recommend? I absolutely recommend that you get errors and omissions and liability insurance. You need both of those. And you need them to protect yourself. I don't care what kind of a company you have, whether it's an LLC, an LLP, a corporation, and hopefully you're not just working as just a sole proprietor. If you are, then you need to start looking at getting an LLC together because that affords you some corporate protections for your company. But you need that insurance in place because if you don't have that insurance in place and you get sued, they will go after your house, your car, your retirement, everything. So you need to have that. And this video is not sponsored, but a regular video sponsor for my Mondays and Friday videos is OREP Insurance. Go to orep.org and you can get a free quote from them. Tell them I sent you. But that's where I have my insurance through. And again, I have errors and omissions and I have liability. And you need to have both of those in place. Thanks so much for that question. That's very good. And there's different levels. You can get anywhere from $300,000 up to $3 million. I think my company is $3 or $5 million or something like that, in multiple instances. You need to make sure that you also let them know everything that you do, all the types of work you do. If you're doing process serving, make sure you're covered for that too. If you are armed, you need to make sure that you let them know. Now, if you're doing a lot of security work, that's going to take a special policy. You need to talk with an expert there. So give them a call over there or check them out at orep.org. That's a freebie for you there, guys. And then our next question is, I'm not even going to try this name. We're going to go with Louie. That one stands out quite a bit right there. I wonder if Alexa is considered a bug. In my humble opinion, absolutely. Now, it's not necessarily like somebody planted it and they are listening to you, but I've heard of, especially older devices, that can be hacked and can be used as bugs, but it's still something that is recording you all the time. The same as your cell phone or your computer or anything. If you have whatever that's Cortana turned on your computer, or you have Google turned on here where you can just say, hey Google, and start talking to it, or whatever the case is, those are recording you all of the time. So I consider them bugs. That's just my personal, not necessarily a professional opinion. Maybe it's a professional opinion, but absolutely. Thank you so much, Louie. I have another question here from Yan G. Can a private investigator only be retained from an inmate only if it goes through a lawyer? Yan, thank you so much for that question. From my personal perspective, my professional perspective, I would only recommend that a PI work for an inmate if retained through an attorney. I suppose they could be retained and not go through the attorney, but there's so many things that aren't right in all of that. One, you are not, your work is not privileged, confidential, protected client work product. It's just out there. So if you hired a private investigator, if an inmate hired a private investigator directly, that was not through their attorney, all of that investigation, every single piece of it, is discoverable. Let's say it's for their criminal defense. Normally in criminal defense, everything is not on the defense side discoverable, only what they're going to take to court, only what they want to present. Because the defense's job is not to prove innocence, it's to defend the charges. The prosecution on the other side has to prove guilt. So that's the first thing. The second thing is just to protect yourself as a private investigator. There are a lot of scams out there, if you will, where they will try to get private investigators to go out and intimidate people, intimidate witnesses, things like that. Go out and talk to this person, go out and talk to that person, and they're witnesses to the case. And what they're trying to do is send a message that says, hey, I can get to you. So there's 100 other reasons too, but I would never suggest for a private investigator to work directly for an inmate in any situation. Only go through an attorney. And attorneys don't mark up the costs of a private investigator. That's a pass-through. So you're going to pay the attorney a little bit of money, but then you've got that. And then the information the private investigator gives to the attorney, how the attorney gives it to the inmate, to the defendant, to the client, then that's up to them. So I hope that helps out, Yan. Back to the mailbag. Pugster8643 says, how do you know when they have appointments? And what Pugster is referring to, he was watching a video about workers' comp cases in other insurance, slip and fall and injury and things like that. And I had mentioned in there, if they have a doctor's appointment, that's a great day to do the surveillance because you know where they're going to go, you know when they're going to be there, things like that. How do you know? Well, the big reason you know is because the insurance company knows. Generally, they will know when they have appointments, where they're going to have those appointments, when they have physical training, different things like that. And when you get those jobs from your insurance company, ask them. They don't always send that information over. Ask them, are there any upcoming medical appointments? Are there any upcoming physical training appointments? Let me know, because those are good. Those are really good to get that video of them when they're going there, while they're there, when they're leaving, and afterwards. Are they displaying themselves differently during those times? That's always good information. A lot of times they're not. You know, they look injured when they leave, and they look injured when they get there, and they look injured when they leave from the medical, and they look injured when they get back home. Sometimes, though, I've had them where I've been doing surveillance, and they're out there, and they're, working their yard, they're doing whatever, all kinds of things, and they never display any possible injuries. But the day of the doctor's appointment, and I've had this, where they go out to the car. I had one not too long ago, go out to the car, throw his cane into the back seat, hops into the car, drives to the medical appointment, gets to the medical, reaches in his back seat, grabs that cane, gets out, hunched over, walking like he could hardly walk with this cane, goes in, has his medical, comes back out with the cane, puts the cane back in, drives out slowly, gets home, gets out of his car, just carrying his cane, walks back in the house. Obviously didn't need a cane all of the time. So anyway, the way we know they have appointments is because the insurance company generally knows. Excuse me. Victor asks online, how effective are drones for surveillance? Thank you so much, Victor. And if you guys have questions, hop down in the chat and let me know. Drones, as far as I'm concerned, for surveillance have almost no use, especially for private investigators. And here's some challenges with that. One, to use a drone in any commercial capacity. So if you get paid a penny or $1 million, you have to have a drone license. You have to have the FCC license to do that. And whether you're licensed or not licensed, there's all these regulations that are required for when you're flying, how you fly, where you can fly, all kinds of things like that. So you have to abide by all of those. Like you can't fly over people. You're not supposed to fly over industrial areas. You have to abide by people's reasonable expectations of privacy, like a drone. If you're working a workers' comp case, let's say, and you think the person's in the backyard and you think they're, on their trampoline jumping up and down with the kids and they've got a 6-foot privacy fence and you use a drone, you have just violated their reasonable expectations of privacy. So there's criminal matters that could come up with that. Definitely civil. You can get sued for that and all kinds of other stuff. So that is the first thing with that. And the second is the average drone battery is 15 to 20 minutes at tops. That's from the time you start it till the time it lands. So that's not like you have 20 minutes when you get over to their house or something like that. And you can't really use a drone to follow a car. One, you're flying over roads. You're not supposed to fly over roads. So you can't really use them to follow a car or anything like that. So outside of extremely special circumstances, I don't see drones. Way back when they first came out, I had got a DJI Pro drone, and I would use it sometimes on rural cases. But what I would do is I could park, and I could go a long ways with this drone out in the middle of nowhere. I could park a couple miles away. I could run it down the road. I could put it up way up. These were before all the regulations were out there. So I could go up about 600 feet. Nobody could hear it. Nobody could see it. I could fly out. I could see what vehicles were at a residence out in the country, and then I could bring it back, and I knew what vehicles. I didn't have to do a lot of drive-bys. But now with all the regulations, you can only go to 400 feet. You still probably couldn't hear it, but out in the country, you can hear things coming from a long ways away. And one of the problems even with that, if I go out and I see the cars there and then they leave and my drone's halfway back, what do? I've got a $2,000 drone up there in the sky. Do I get in my car and follow them? Do I let my drone drop? Do I instantly have it come back and hope it's going to be there when I get back? What do I do? So there's a lot of complications. I don't think that there's a lot of use for drones for the average private investigator doing surveillance out there. And some more questions in here. Leah asks, are there any required or suggested disclaimers for PI advertisements, websites like the ones at the end of attorneys' ads? Not that I know of. Again, I'm not an attorney. I can't give you legal advice, but not that I know of. My legal disclaimers are in my contract, not going to be on my website. I don't believe that there's any, but you may check with your state and see if there's any requirements in there. MFB asks, are you familiar with Johnston Blakely from the Investigative Training? Heard the name, don't know anything about it. Thanks so much. And I want to remind people to, I don't know if you're related with Johnston Blakely or anything like that, but don't try to advertise other people through my videos or my channels or anything. Yan G says, I've learned so much from your videos. Thank you for your time and effort into putting those out there, and you're welcome, Yan. Let's hop back over to the mailbag. I've got a couple more questions. If anybody has questions, hop down in the chat and let me know. Again, if you're watching it after the live stream, you can go into the comments of any of my videos, pop a question in, and I will try to get them on a future live stream here on Saturday. Brian Yerger says, can an ethical hacker get into a cell phone? He says, my girlfriend won't allow me to see her cell phone, and she said even if we were to get married, I would never be allowed to see her cell phone because that's her private business. Does this sound like a cheater to you? There's a whole lot in there, so I'm going to start at the back end. Does this sound like a cheater to you? Does that make her a cheater? No. Is it one of the red flags? Yes, but that doesn't make her a cheater. That may also mean that she just wants to have privacy in things. I'm not going to tell you how to run your personal relationships. Myself, my phone, lay it down all the time. Don't care if my wife picks it up. The same with hers. She doesn't care if I pick hers up. If I get a call and I'm away from my phone, she'll answer it. If I get a text, she'll check it. If she gets a call or a text, we have a very good open relationship. We trust each other. Nothing to worry about there. Now, Does that make her a cheater? No. Might it be a red flag? It could be, and it's going to depend on what you need out of that relationship as to how you are going to feel about that. But going back to some of the other stuff, she says that it is her cell phone, it's her private business, and I'm not an attorney, I can't give you legal advice, but from my experience, my knowledge, absolutely, she's right. It's her private business. It's her cell phone. Even if you're married, her life is still her life. So, take that as you will. But going back to the first question, can an ethical hacker get into a cell phone? Now, there's a problem with that entire question, because an ethical hacker is not going to hack a phone. What an ethical hacker, just from my definition of an ethical hacker, a white hat hacker, they're going to be somebody that's doing what's called pen testing or penetration testing, checking security on networks, laptops, email systems, things like that. They're not hacking things. They're checking things from a security standpoint to see if you can get in. If they are hacking to get information, that's not ethical, especially if it's a phone. And these things are protected under the FTC. And if you hack somebody's phone, or you hire somebody to hack somebody's phone, or anybody hacks somebody's phone, you're actually violating wiretap laws out there. There are federal legal ramifications. So if they're hacking a phone, they're not an ethical hacker. That's the bottom line right there. So I hope that helps out right there. MFB asks, how often do you utilize GPS, and do you recommend a good provider? I do not use GPS, period, and that's it, for any of my surveillances. So I could not recommend a provider. I have a couple of GPS units that I use for training for bug sweeps, because we look for GPS devices. We have found GPS devices on many vehicles in the past, and they usually ended up going over to law enforcement, and the people end up getting charged with stalking, harassment, different things like that. Now, that's going to depend on the state that you live in, whether you can or cannot. But there's a big difference between tracking your asset, a vehicle, and tracking an individual. And even in those states that have laws that allow people to use a GPS tracker on their vehicle, so it's a married couple, the man thinks the wife might be cheating, so he pops a GPS tracker on her car. He is tracking his asset, but he's also tracking her. And it kind of goes along with this deal with hacking somebody's cell phone. She has a right to go wherever she wants in privacy, whenever she wants, without somebody else knowing. And I'm not an attorney. I'm not going to get into all the legalities of that. But I know here in Colorado there have been private investigators arrested for stalking, harassment. They've lost their entire business. Their clients have been arrested. When clients come to me and they ask me if we can track somebody, I tell them absolutely, we can definitely help you with that. What I will usually suggest is that we use 2 or more operatives to do surveillance to guarantee that we have a better chance to do the tracking of her. We're not going to put a GPS tracker. We're not going to put software on their phone. If they have software on their phone, I'm not going to take the information from them. And I may not even take the case if they're tracking them that way. So I hope that helps there, MFB. Victor Kia, what has been your favorite source for learning OSINT, open source intelligence? I've had multiple courses over the years. I am going to... give me a second here. I'm going to hop over to the old intraweb here really quick and try to bring this up for you. If you go over to this page right here, ppiac.org, that's the Professional Private Investigators Association of Colorado. That's our state PI association. We have our 2023 Rocky Mountain Investigators Conference coming up September 7th to 9th. I'm going to do a shameless plug here. I am the president for the PPIAC. I don't make any money if you go to this. This is an in-person training, but it has a whole lot of stuff going on. And we have a full day, one full day of hands-on open source intelligence by Sandra Stibberts. You have to be a licensed PI or a member of PPIAC to attend that. But if you're interested and you want a vacation out here in Colorado, I would say give this a look and see. We have this coming up. This is one day. And then we have 2 other days, Friday and Saturday, with all of these other courses: fraud investigations, criminal defense investigations, due diligence, drones, accident investigations, you name it, it's all in there. We do have the certifications for your licensing, for the, I'm sorry, my mind's skipping here because I'm trying to do too many things technically. But we do have the CLEs, the certificates for the CLEs, if you need those as well. So you might check something like that out. Sandra trains in a lot of different places. She has online training and things like that. So you may check those things out. So I hope that helps out there. Watch with Wayne says, how are you doing? I'm doing fine, Wayne. How are you? Yeah, Wayne is a private investigator here in Canada. Hey, how's it going there? What part of Canada are you from? Let me know. What's your company? Go ahead, throw it out there. I don't care. Don't do anything else, but you can throw that out there if you want. Okay, and then Leah had some comments in there as well on one of the others. So we're going to hop back over to the mailbag. We've got another question here from Hosea Fonzo. Do you sell devices to detect bugs embedded in the human body? I'm going to have a drink here, and this is just coffee. No judgments there. Do you sell devices to detect bugs embedded in the human body? If not, can you please tell me which model you recommend? Again, a lot of stuff going on in there. Hey, Wayne, welcome. Thank you for joining from Ontario there. Do I sell devices to detect bugs embedded in the human body? No, I don't. Again, if you go back over to my webpage, and I'll show you really quick here. If you hop over to my webpage, freeprivateinvestigatortraining.com, go here to PI gear, and I have a whole section dedicated to bug detectors. We have like the Lawmate RD30. It is a personal space RF bug detector. It is not a professional bug detector. It is just a device that is really good for looking for something if you're going to a hotel room, if you're going to stay at an Airbnb, something like that. But, it's not going to find anything in your body unless it's transmitting. It may be able to, but I wouldn't rely on that for that. The best way we ever find bugs is eyes, hands, and inspection cameras. But going back to the question, looking for a bug embedded in somebody's body is a very difficult thing. And we get these calls a lot. And it is extremely difficult because even like the Orion that we have, which is a nonlinear junction detector, that can find pieces of electronics inside of all kinds of different things, it's not going to find something in the human body because of the physiology of a human body. And I'm not a scientist. I can't go into all these great details on this. But your body is nothing more than a big bag of water. And if there's something in there and it's transmitting, it's not going to transmit very well. And it's not going to be very powerful, and it's going to be very difficult. And all the things in your body are going to create problems for that to find it. I do not know of anything that can detect a bug in a human body. When I get asked this question, when someone calls me and they ask, and it usually has to do with some kind of a threat that they believe is credible from one of the ABC companies out there, one of those 3-lettered government agencies. I tell them, go to your regular doctor and talk to them. Tell them what you think is going on, why you think it's going on, and ask them to schedule an x-ray. That's the only way you're going to detect if it's in there, is an x-ray. They can x-ray your arm, your wrist, your ankle, wherever you think that is, and they can help you do that. And even like the Orion, even if it was able to detect it, I wouldn't use it on a human body because a nonlinear junction detector is broadcasting a powerful RF signal. Whether it's at 800 megahertz or 2.4 gigahertz or whatever it is, different non-lens do a different thing, but they are broadcasting a very powerful radio frequency. You never want to point that at anybody. You could do a lot of damage by pointing that at somebody, so we would never use that. MFB asks, are you a member of the Massachusetts Association? I am not, MFB. I am a member of PPIC, Professional Private Investigators Association of Colorado. I am a member of NCISS, the National Council of Investigation and Security Specialists. I'm probably going to miss some of these that I'm a member of. I am a member of ASIS. It's an International Association of Security and Investigation Specialists. I am a member of TALI, FALI, and CALI. That's the Texas Association of Licensed Investigators, California Association of Licensed Investigators, Florida Association of Licensed Investigators, and ALI, is it? I have to think of all the acronyms out there. ACI, the Association of Christian Investigators, and probably some others there. So I'm looking at all the questions. I think I've pretty much covered everything. My mailbox is empty. I want to thank everybody so much for joining. If you have more questions, hop into the comments on any of my videos and pop them in there, and I will see you next Saturday. Thanks so much for joining.